Welcome back to the show, everybody. Today I have Nicolle Hodges on my podcast. So Nicolle's been on the show before. She's been a friend for 5 or 6 years, but unfortunately we actually haven't caught up at all really on just till before the show. So I'm super excited to have Nicolle back on. I won't do any major introductions. I'll let Nicolle do that. But Nicolle, so happy to have you on the show today. And, just before I guess we get into it, just let people know just a little bit about yourself, and then we'll just kind of start chatting.
Sure. Thank you. It's so good to see you. And we said it's been about 2 years since we've actually had a proper catch up. Obviously, we're following what each other do on social media. And I always love your controversial takes, although I'm sitting there being like, it's not actually controversial. It's kind of the truth. So just for anyone who is tuning in for the first time and didn't catch me last time I was on the podcast, or is not familiar with my work, my name is Nicolle Hodges. I go by journalist, sexual freedom philosopher, and I'm also a dominatrix, which I'm moving away from that a little bit. I'm kind of rebranding into doing more intimacy work with couples, though, that uses BDSM as the main vessel to teach closeness and connection. And the reason why I'm kind of moving away from dominatrix is just because I'm not taking on submissives anymore, which I was for a while. And this language might be really unfamiliar to a lot of people, so we can kind of get into what all this means. But it's a realm I've been exploring for the last decade. I'm actually writing a book about it right now that questions whether or not BDSM could ever be considered a form of therapy. Certainly those who are in it would vouch and say that it's therapeutic. So in terms of it being a somatic and psychological experience, it's something that I really enjoy guiding people through. And I also run something called the Garden of Earthly Delights, which is a community for women where I host these erotic parties that, again, help women get into their bodies using BDSM. And then when they attend a garden or they complete a task, they receive a badge. Cool. And so I'm trying to kind of gamify the experience of growth as an adult, which not everyone knows how to track that in a fun way. And I was, big into Girl Guides growing up, and I loved earning badges for completing tasks. And I'm just like, why can't we do that as adults, but have it be in the realm of sexuality and our sexual energy and eros and our connection to self and our ability to move through shame and speak our desires into existence. And so that's something I'm working on. And then one last thing, oh my gosh, yes, I actually do it all. And to that, I will say happy Gemini season. It's my birthday on June 6th. So awesome. I multi-hyphenate over here, but men who take baths. So the other thing that I do is I put men in bubble baths and I interview them about masculinity. And I'm looking at it as building a roster of positive male role models. And so I'm relaunching the website, but essentially I want it to be a place where parents feel comfortable sending their adolescent boys to look and read through interviews or to watch interviews with, yes, men in bathtubs, but essentially talking about the vulnerable process of being a man and the expectations and what it means to fail and to pick yourself back up, what it actually means to be a modern leader that moves beyond the archetype of simply the celebrity or simply the athlete.
Well, that's a very good description. And I just want to say for everyone listening, like, part of the reason why I think a lot of people are attracted to you and your work is that, and please take this as a compliment, like you're just such a normal person to meet. Like you think that someone who does all this work would be, I don't know, just like over the top different. It would come across as like kind of strange. But like, I remember like as soon as I met you, it'd be like, oh, I could just go for a beer with this girl and it would just be like totally normal. We could just have this great conversation. And so it's interesting that you do all this kind of work that you do. But just like we were kind of chatting very, very briefly, before the podcast, and I did want to ask you this, you said I knew it and you were absolutely right. So, up until recently, you were mostly into polyamorous relationships. Now you're into monogamous relationship. So why did you make that move?
I'm so glad that it's you that I'm having this conversation with. I was like, who's the podcaster that's going to get me on to talk about this for the first time? And it's just, I just love that it's you because of the way that we communicate so openly. And I do feel really comfortable sharing this with you. And I haven't really publicly shared about this aspect of it. So why did I make the switch from polyamory to monogamy? Listen, I'm a journalist at heart, right? And I treat my life like my own greatest experiment. And when something comes to my attention, I need to see it through myself to the end. I do not take anyone else's perspective wholeheartedly unless I've gone through it. And I needed to do that with polyamory. I needed to go deep into these communities in the same way that I did with BDSM. I needed to go deep into these communities. I needed to excavate what was the truth. I needed to look at what felt like bullshit right in the face. And I needed to do it by actually experiencing it. And I am so lucky that I actually had a beautiful relationship with a couple. And while I was in what was called a primary partnership. So I had my primary relationship. And then I also was dating this couple at kind of like, I would say like the height of my exploration. So when it was more than just being in an open relationship where we were able to sleep with other people, but I actually truly developed feelings for this couple and individually. So in many ways, I had multiple relationships because I had a relationship with him. I had a relationship with her. Then we had a relationship together. If this sounds like it's complicated and takes up a lot of time and energy, you're right. And then I also had my primary partnership. And that relationship was great. So I'm not coming out of this going, oh, what a terrible experience that was. What a mess that was. I'm throwing it out because I just didn't have a good time. It sucked. No, it was great. And I'm still coming out of it going, that took up so much time, so much energy. There is so much avoidance in those communities. There's a lack of depth that comes with these relationships. There's this sense of transaction that naturally creeps in where you fragment people out and you go, well, you are the lover that satisfies this part of me. And you're the lover that satisfies this other part of me that this other person can't. And then as soon as you get to the point where things get difficult and relationships are meant to go down and ground even further into intimacy through hardship that you overcome together, and not just hardship of, oh, let's have another conversation about the next person you want to go on a date with. That's not the kind of hardship I'm talking about. I'm talking about the hardship that comes from actually choosing somebody and all of what that means to say no to everything else. That depth never comes. And so when you run into, let's say, an issue or a challenge where you're confronted with your own fears around intimacy or attachment or however you want to put it, you can simply let that person go. So you can have a string of relationships that now become based on this jolt of newness and excitement. And then you bring jealousy into it and you're told that you're not meant to be jealous at all. That jealousy is actually almost a base, like grunty kind of primitive emotion that these higher up intellectual enlightened beings who are all about love for everyone just don't have. And to me, I started recognizing that jealousy was actually my internal system, my feminine instincts telling me that something was not right, and that I was never going to actually be able to settle down into the full feminine expression. I was never going to fully be able to express myself as a woman because that groundedness of safety was never going to be there because I never felt fully claimed. I never felt safe and fully claimed by the masculine to actually allow myself to fully relax and to release into a depth of love that I knew I was never actually going to find by scattering my attention across all of these relationships and trying to extradite the feeling, or exercise rather, the feeling of jealousy out of my system, which was inherently against what I feel it means to be truly in love.
Yeah, I mean, jealousy is a natural emotion that people feel. And I think that, with any emotion where, we see it as like, negative or that doesn't feel good, it's never like I don't think like we should try to like not feel those emotions. We should just have like a game plan for when we do feel these emotions as to what to do. So for those people who, say that they never feel jealousy or they're so enlightened, like I just think, first of all, I think it's bullshit. And second of all, I think it's just the wrong game plan, because like you are going to feel angry at times. You are going to feel jealous at times. You are going to feel sad at times. Like these are all normal emotions that, people feel. Like if someone says, oh, I'm never angry. Oh, I'm never sad. Like I don't believe those people either. Like I think those people are just as full of shit as the people who say that, they never get jealous. And so I think what it is just more like acceptance. Like, you know what, like sometimes I'm going to have certain feelings. Sometimes I'm going to feel sad. Sometimes I'm going to feel angry. Sometimes I'm going to feel jealous. And when I experience these emotions, am I just going to, like you use the word avoid it, or am I going to sink into it and actually look into it and see, what's on the other side? Like, how can I, deal with these emotions as opposed to just pretend that they're not there?
Well, for sure. And you're either going to create these complex narratives to justify why you don't feel that way or why you're trying to let go of that emotion. Or you're going to impose that emotion. And I think that when it comes to jealousy, it's so easy to use jealousy to impose restrictions on someone else's behavior, because you just don't have the ability to recognize within yourself, like, what is this emotion actually trying to tell me about my own feelings of self-worth, or how confident I feel in this relationship, or whatever it might be. And so it's easy to impose boundaries on someone else and say, well, I'm jealous. This is how you're making me feel. Therefore, I'm setting these restrictions on your behavior to make me feel better. Well, that's not what setting a healthy boundary is. A healthy boundary is when you recognize within yourself where you might feel that you're compromising yourself, and you say, this is how this makes me feel. Here are the things that I need in a relationship in order to feel secure. And then you allow the other person to decide for themselves whether or not they want to adhere to your boundaries, right? It's not an imposition. But now we have these two extremes where it's either like everyone's going, well, monogamy is about putting restrictions on other people. And now polyamory is apparently there's no rules, no restrictions, nothing. And so, or I guess, let me be clear, because if someone's listening to this and they are quite deep into the polyamory realm, then they'll correct me. And so I don't want to get caught up in definitions too much, but there's something even further than polyamory, which is actually called relationship anarchy, where it's completely non-hierarchical. So there are no ideas of primary partners or nesting partners, which is someone you live with or anything like that. It's everyone's equal. Everyone has equal say in how this relationship progresses. Then you have polyamory, which you can have different variations of it, but you might have the primary partner, and then you might have other people that you can sort of open relationships, ethical non-monogamy, they're calling it, although they want to take the word ethical, so it's just non-monogamy. That's when you can sleep with other people, but maybe you don't develop lasting feelings for them. But then also think about the kind of message that's sending. Oh yeah, we can go use somebody else for sexual gratification. We can follow this desire to the end where we have sex with one another, but we're not going to allow ourselves to now develop feelings. Okay, well, you've just turned that person into a vessel for your own self-enjoyment and pleasure, and you're kind of devoiding them of their humanity. And then you have polyamory, which is you're allowed to, polyamory literally means like multi-love. You're allowed to fall in love and have deep connected relationships with multiple people. And then, but what's funny to me now is monogamy is almost getting, it's almost being looked at as inherently negative, that somehow desiring to be, and in my case, fully claimed and develop a relationship with someone where I can confidently talk to them about a marriage and about children, and we're customizing what monogamy means to us. It's not like we're dead. We're not going to sleep with other people, but the conversations that we're able to have, I don't feel any less expansive. If anything, I feel more expansive in my expression of self because I feel more secure that this man, his attention is actually not wandering. And he's able to focus on helping us build a life because he's not out there also receiving female attention and getting distracted and looking out at other people. And he's not worried that I'm doing that either. And there's something that really, there's a shift that happens when you actually decide to commit to another person. It feels like a choice. It doesn't feel forced. And I think that's the conclusion I needed or wanted to come to, which is like, I'm choosing monogamy. And I think that's maybe what a lot of women are going to go through over the next few years, especially as they enter their mid-30s and they start going, holy shit, my window for having children is starting to close. Am I actually going to continue playing this game? Or do I want to make my way back to monogamy, but I want it to be a choice rather than what feels kind of like for a while there was the only option?
Yeah, it seems like, in order to build a deep connection with someone, like you have to be able to trust them fully. And, part of the trusting them fully is, getting to know, just them to some degree, as opposed to getting to know like so many different other people. And like you said, like, it's exhausting, sometimes being all of these relationships. So like, you just don't have literally like the mental energy or bandwidth to like create these like deep connections. And so, you just have really, again, for most people, it's just one person where they actually just have literally like the bandwidth. I mean, you sleep for 8 hours a day, you got to work out, you got to, have a job, all this kind of other stuff. Like to have like multiple relationships on the go, like it doesn't really seem feasible to be able to get to that like deep place of connection. And I also think was really interesting that you use the word transactional, just because, I see this, and sometimes like, obviously in business, there's going to be, sort of friends that you have where, it's more of like a business relationship and people just like accept that. But like the people that you feel best with are the friends where there's nothing exchanged, but just like friendship. And like, that's why like a lot of people, they still, like hanging out with their friends from high school. Cause like, they're just not like exchanging anything. Like, it's just like friendship for friendship. It's not like, oh, if you do this for me, then I'm going to do that for you. And like, I understand how someone could feel used. And I don't just mean in like a sexual way, because like people can feel used in like a business relationship, or like this person's just, using me at work kind of thing. And like, that feels awful. So I can imagine, having that feeling like over and over again in a polyamorous relationship, or, the different various definitions that you just explained to us really, really well, how people could kind of feel like that. And it just gives you this kind of like really shitty feeling. Whereas like if someone's just like, giving you their friendship and giving you their love, and you're just giving that back, and you're not really doing it for any reason other than the fact that you just like hanging out with this person, or the fact that you just, love being with this person, it just makes it so much easier. And then you're not like putting on a face for anyone. Like, you can just be your ultimate complete self. You don't have to put on a show. And I think that's like where we feel like the most calm, the most peace. I think that's when like our nervous system relaxes, our heart rate goes down. And I mean, who wouldn't want that, So it seems like, that's kind of what you've achieved now. So I'm so happy to hear that, things have worked out,
Yeah. It was like, again, I like to take the long way around to my own truth. I think that's what it is. And I needed to explore polyamory so I could come back to monogamy with a real sense. Because I had a monogamous relationship. I was actually in a 7-year monogamous relationship in my kind of early to mid or late 20s. But it didn't feel like it was a fully embodied choice. I was like, okay, this is what we do. This is how society operates. So I'm really glad that I went on this exploration. And now I'm coming back and I'm fully committed to this person. And it's really from a sense of deep choice. And just, I'll make a couple more comments on this. I just remember to comment on the nervous system thing that you just said, right? How good it feels to have a calm nervous system. Even in monogamy, there's no guarantee that things are going to last forever, right? Like
56% in the divorce. Like
56% divorce.
I was
right?
creeping your Instagram actually, and I was listening to the Huberman podcast that you
so
mentioned before.
bored.
I'm only about like an hour, maybe an hour and a half in, so I still have like 2 hours to go. But it's awesome. But
so this
anyways,
New
go
York
ahead.
lawyer is talking about, he's a New York divorce lawyer, and he talks a lot about prenups and the importance of prenups, which he's, says everyone assumes that it's just so unsexy because when you go into marriage, you're supposed to go into this with this idea of like, nothing's ever going to go wrong. Why would we need a prenup? But he actually makes some really good points as to why prenups are so important at that, and that of the divorce, of all of his clients, those who created prenups, none of those clients have gotten divorced. It's the ones who did not create prenups who have gotten divorced. But all of that aside, he basically equates getting married to winning the lottery. Like this idea that we have of you're going to meet your person, you're going to live your entire lives, you're going to evolve with each other through every phase of life and be compatible at every stage. And then you're going to, you have children, whatever, and die and have this like beautiful long love story. We want that. So many people want that, but it's like winning the lottery. Like that's how rare it is. Esther Perel is a psychotherapist who I really like her work as well. And she said, you'll likely get married 3 times in your life. And if you're lucky, it'll be with the same person. So we have these people acknowledging how difficult it really is. And so there's this fallacy in monogamy that somehow people are living with their head in the clouds, though, going like, oh, well, just because we're getting married, it doesn't, and under monogamy as our structure, it means we're not going to get divorced. Well, that's just not happening. The numbers are not showing that. So, and yet we keep doing it. So we're hopeful to a fault, which is fine. Everyone thinks they're going to be the one to, not be part of a statistic ever, but that's okay. We need that. And it's a beautiful thing. And something this divorce lawyer says, James, I believe, I can't remember off the top of my head, but he was like, do it. It's worth the risk of all of these things. If you were going to get on a flight and the airline's like, 56% chance the airline's going to crash, you'd be like, absolutely not. I will walk. But for some reason, we hear 56% divorce. We're still going to do it. We're still going to do it because
we all think that ours is going to work out. Why is that? Do you think?
Right. I do believe that humans are fundamentally wired for connection. We love love. It is the greatest drug on earth, and it feels good to do life with someone and get through hard things and take on challenges. I mean, I hoped one day I would find someone where it made sense to do the most nonsensical thing I could think of, which is have children. In this economy?
Pretty wild.
Right? Come on.
It's a big risk.
It's a huge
with everything
risk.
that's going on, like with all this, stuff that the kids are like indoctrinated into now, and like the schools and stuff.
Oh
like
my
there's
God.
so many people now doing homeschooling now, and I totally get it.
For sure. I'm like, it's a mess out there, and I'm gonna do it because I am so in love with this person that I want the challenge of raising children with him. I wasn't a woman who came into this life that just ubiquitously wanted kids. I've never had that deep motherly instinct to just have a child. I feel like I do a lot of mothering in my work. But I've never really thought, okay, I want a child. And I have friends who I think they're incredibly brave. They're getting IVF done because they don't even have a partner. They just want a kid. I'm like, I do not relate to you. But if I fall in love one day and I actually go, no, I want to know what it's like to do I want the full human experience with you because it's you. That's what I found. And I don't think, coming back to the nervous system, no, I know that I was never going to get there with my previous partner because because we were open, because we were polyamorous in some way, no matter what, I was always bracing myself to have to hear that he had fallen in love with someone else, or that he, a date went really well, or that he's going to come home and he's going to tell me that who knows what it is. The mind will make up all of these things, even with parameters, even with guardrails, even with promises, even with boundaries, whatever it is. I was always bracing myself. And I think now where I'm at in this relationship that I'm in now, and I don't even have children with this man yet, but I also think, okay, well, with all of the things that both of us want to accomplish in life, now we're going to add children to it. How could we possibly also maintain other relationships? And really some of the only polyamorous relationships that I've seen work are people who don't want kids and who put their careers first and have no intention of living together. And so what they do is they have multiple relationships with people that are in some way scheduled, right? A week here, a couple weeks there. This is what we do together. This is my vacation partner. This is a partner that maybe I, have more challenges with, and we maybe go deeper in certain ways, but it's never, or this is the partner I have a BDSM relationship with. That's
all transactional again as well.
All transactional. And again, for some people that really works, but I came to the realization that it just wasn't going to work for me because I was never actually going to truly feel safe in the way that I need to feel safe in order to really to fully express myself. And I'll give you one last treat because you're getting me first on this, but check this out.
I'm lucky.
Check this out.
Nice. So that's for people who are just listening, it's a collar on her neck. And so just explain what that collar is and what it means.
So I have gone my entire life. And again, like this all ties into this exploration and what I learned about myself through polyamory and coming through it. And I think that for a lot of people, this is worth exploring when you ask yourself, well, why do I want to go into this relationship dynamic? For me, like I had spent my entire life in a rather masculine expression. To me, that means, I've been very goal oriented. I haven't been flowy and feminine and super in touch with my emotions or really in my body, and have been more headstrong and more intellectual and more like driven in many ways that have served me greatly. But it's kept me in a dominant state where the thought of surrendering to a man was terrifying to me because I was so afraid to not be in the lead, to not be the decision maker, and to actually let go and allow myself to be held and seen and nurtured. And, what's interesting right now is, we were talking about this before we started recording. I'm having a bit of a blank canvas moment in my life right now where I'm looking at the career that I've had, which has been primarily in terms of my forward-facing career, where I, make the bulk of my money, and I don't in many ways consider them to be kind of like glorified hobbies and things I really care about. But my career has been as a journalist, and I'm looking at that and I'm going, is that what I want? Right. And I have the luxury right now of being with a man who goes, hey, I got you. I've got us. Like, take this space. Let your imagination explode. Dream about what it is that you want. And I'm going to hold it down for us while you do that. And
that means a lot.
That means a lot. And so that has allowed me for really the first time in my life to go, I can actually surrender. I can breathe. I can submit to this person, and it feels good. It feels good to honor him, to be devoted to him, to express myself, to dream, to be a woman. And that doesn't make me feel weak for the first time.
And the other thing I was going to say about that too is like when you were talking about like being in this sort of like, dominant state, like a lot of times, guys, when they see a girl like that, who is in a dominant state, they don't want to necessarily like nurture her. What they want to do is like show her that like, oh, I'm the dominant one. You know what I mean? And then it's just more of like almost like an aggression where you're someone that's just trying to like show you up to some degree, to show you that like they're more dominant than you are. And then you don't really get to be in that submissive state. Like you're just sort of, you know, it's hard to explain. You can probably maybe explain it better.
Well,
better
I'll take it one level of psychology further and actually say I attracted submissive men, but my heart didn't actually want submissive men. At my core, what I was yearning for was to submit, but I was so afraid to do it that I would attract these submissive men and find myself in relationships with men who were either submissive to me and I would lose sexual interest in them, or men that weren't fully developed in their masculine and then would try to lead me with, I'll say like force sometimes, and it wouldn't work. And now we're butting heads. Right.
Yeah.
And so it was like men that were undeveloped, that were overdeveloped in their feminine expression and underdeveloped in their masculine expression. And that's where I would find myself. So I was just constantly unsatisfied. And then, of course, I'm doing things in the relationship that don't feel like they're in alignment with me because I can't actually or couldn't actually accept for the longest time that I was living out of alignment with my true desires of what it means to be in a relationship, which is monogamous and submissive. And then I can go out into the world and think about the power that I have now. This foundation that I have, this strong masculine, dominant, like truly dominant man who loves me is creating this foundation for me to replenish myself. Now I can go out into the world and I can be dominant and I can get shit done and I can do the work I need to do with that focus, but I can come home and I
cry
can
on his shoulder.
I can fucking cry in his shoulders and put on he can put on a collar and, call me a fancy house kitty. And I'm just like, oh my God, whatever. I'll do anything. Like, yes, this is great, and that feels so good.
Well, that's good. I mean, it sounds like you found like a really good balance there. And I think an important part of that too is that, you were talking about, the dominance part, and maybe part of you obviously doesn't want to lose that, but it doesn't mean that you are going to lose it completely. It just means that you're not going to do it in your relationship anymore,
Actually feel balanced though. That's the thing, right? I'm not going to lose it because in many ways and we have these energies inside of us. Masculine, feminine is generally what we call them. And my masculine energy is incredibly developed, and I can tap into that and use it. And it is a potent source of fuel for me in being focused and having my attention somewhere and getting something done and it's like I can use my feminine energy to be a visionary and see what needs to be done and who needs what and how things are connected and be in touch with my emotions and have an empathetic approach to things. And then I can actually go, and my masculine can then come in and go, okay, well, here are the steps of how we're going to reach that vision.
Yeah. I mean, even when I first met you, I just, for whatever reason, got this feeling that like you just have a really good heart and that, you can be like submissive and you are to me like extremely feminine, so I imagine that
you saw that in the beginning and I think that's why we got along so well from the very beginning, because I was like, this man can hold space for the feminine, and I sensed that in you too. Even though it was underdeveloped in me, there was still an instinctual part of me that went, oh, I can relax around this person. He's got it. He's good.
And that's what you want, is you want people that you can relax around. Like, again, like I was saying, not even just in your romantic relationships, but also in like your friendships. Cause like, obviously you're going to spend a lot of time outside of work with your romantic partner, but like who wants to spend time with like friends when you guys are like trying to like compete on like Friday and Saturday night? Like, like I don't want that. I don't think anybody really wants that, and that's just like people trying to like, validate themselves to, a certain degree. Like when I'm out on Friday and Saturday and, on the weekends, cause I work pretty hard just like you do. So like, there's not like a ton of like, free time that I get. I just want to chill. Like I don't want to like compete with anyone. Like I just want to chill out.
Yeah.
And, the fact that you can do that, just seems like, it's going to be wonderful, not just for like you, but for just like your overall health, I think too. Like I think in like the long term, like these things are, linked to even like, cardiovascular disease, maybe to like a certain degree, just because you're always like ramped up. Like you can probably even sleep better at night.
I sleep better. I feel clearer in my mind. I especially nearing the end of my relationship, it was a 5.5-year relationship. We went through COVID together, and part of me also goes like, okay, I don't know if I would have stayed with this person as long if COVID hadn't forced us together and in many ways trauma bonded us. And no shade towards him. We're in a really good place and we've thanked each other immensely for really helping us move through and navigate a lot of our relationship was a bit of a sandbox for our childhood trauma. And I'm grateful for all of the lessons for sure. I'm grateful to not be in it anymore, but I'm also grateful for the lessons. But I had friends, especially near the end, who were really concerned for me. They were really concerned for my health and also the complex narratives that I had started creating in order to make sense of the unacknowledged pain within me.
Wow. Well, I mean, it's good to have friends around you who like recognize that. And also too, obviously, the fact that you can come out of the relationship and say that, there's no, ills against each other, like that's good for one another too. Cause when someone's like bashing the other person and, you still like hold all this anger or resentment, against them, then that's obviously not good either. Right.
No. I was really intentional about the ending of that relationship too. We explored conscious uncoupling, which I'm not sure if, many people know about it. There's a couple of books that have been written on it now. There's actually that card deck, We're Not Really Strangers. They came up with a breakup edition where I actually had us sit down every night for, I think it was like 2 weeks in a row, maybe, as we were coming to an end, because we were still living together as we were separating, right? Which is a painful process. And I would have us sit down with this deck of cards and actually go through and answer these questions and go through this deck of cards and be honest with each other. Because think about it, like it's such a, and again, some relationships end in such an epic fashion that the thought of being in the room with this person is impossible. Maybe they've betrayed you and hurt you so badly you just can't even sit and hear another word that comes out of their mouth. I understand that. But at the same time, if you can be intentional about ending, that person holds quite potent medicine for you. They've been with you. They've noticed your patterns. And now that things are ending in some way or another, sometimes for better or worse, there's nothing left to lose. And so there's an incredibly powerful period of time where maybe you can actually end the relationship better than the entirety of the relationship was. And no matter what, you can be proud of that. And you can learn something about yourselves that you can then be aware of as you carry forward into developing other relationships down the line.
Well, it sounds like everything that you learned in your past relationship, you're now, applying to your new one. So like, even though, things in the past obviously, didn't work out exactly as you wanted to, there was just so many lessons in there that, you can now apply to, a new one. And that happens in other aspects of life too. People start one business and, they make a shitload of mistakes, and then they start another business and they don't make those mistakes, and the second one succeeds,
Yeah.
And I think that's why, too, like it's very, very rare when someone meets someone when they're, 14 or 15 years old and they, kind of end up getting married happily ever after kind of thing, because you have to, experience different people, make mistakes, and then learn through those mistakes and then apply them to this relationship. So, I think you've kind of gotten into it, a little bit here today, but like, what would be, say, like the biggest takeaways that you took from the last relationship that you're now taking into this one, and how is it making it better?
Great question. Something is coming through for me that I would like to share. And again, I have never shared this publicly, but I feel like in the process that I went through of separating from my ex, it was indeed a process. And in so many ways, I wanted to go, okay, well, at the 3-month mark, I should be feeling this way. I should be over them. If we go through this conscious uncoupling thing, then I'm going to learn all these things and then that's going to make it easier. And grief came in waves. And I had never actually in my life experienced grief, which made me realize that in many ways, I've actually avoided the depth of love for my whole life. My fear of grief caused me to actually avoid love. And when I allowed myself to truly grieve the love that I thought was going to be enduring with this person and everything we had been through, to come out of it and to say, I actually love better now because I grieved. And I grieved all the way down to the bottom. And I'll give your listeners an example of what that meant. So a lot of the time when a relationship is ending, the grief is actually for all of the things that will not come to fruition that we imagined. And in fantasy, everything is obviously perfect. So we have an idealized version of the relationship that exists in the future that we're never going to touch. And so in many ways, it feels like we're never going to touch that happiness. And so part of grieving the relationship is also getting really clear about all of the things that didn't go right. And that's not shitting on your ex. That's actually just giving yourself a chance to be grounded in reality when your mind and your heart want to go, but what about that trip we were supposed to go on? What about the children that we wanted to have? What about this future that we wanted to build? And that is always going to feel better because it's out of reach and it's not tainted by reality.
You got to be objective.
You have to be objective. And it's actually really important to do that. And it's really important to do that actually at touch points throughout the relationship and not wait until the end to be grounded in reality. So one thing I will say that I'm bringing forward into my next relationship now is daily check-ins. And I know that sounds strange, but it's not hard. It's not hard when you're having fun, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, how are you feeling about us right now? How are you feeling? How are you feeling? How is us? How is the us feeling? And so looking at, you're on the same team for the we. You each have your own self and your own ideas. And then there's the we, and you're kind of just checking in on the we. And when you're playful about it, when you're having a good time, when you're not attached to it, when you don't feel like your own sense of self-worth relies on the we being perfect, the we can be grounded in reality, and you can actually have the types of conversations you need to have rather than leaving those conversations for the end of the relationship when everything's disintegrated anyway. And you need a list of a reality check to remind yourself, well, ooh, actually, we were really incompatible in many ways. And why didn't I see that? Well, it's because you weren't checking in. So that's one thing that I'm bringing forward. The other thing is I actually hosted a funeral for our unborn children so I could let them go. And this was probably the lowest point of grief. When I say I touched the bottom of grief, I was literally on a bathroom floor for 3 hours sobbing as I imagined myself having a conversation with the children that we said we were going to have together and telling them that I was sorry, that I was not going to, that they were not going to exist, and feeling the grief that it felt like as if I was hosting a funeral for them and letting them go. And had I not done that, I don't think I would have been able to really move through. And it took me a year. Realistically, I decided to be single for a year. It took me about a year to move.
And I think that's good too, you need that time to process, right?
You do. So you don't end up using other people. And so you can really take in everything and go through the full process. And like I said, touch the bottom of the grief. But this was the hardest day for me. And the most beautiful thing came through. So I'm doing this visualization exercise, and I'm imagining myself talking to these children, and I'm apologizing to them. I'm saying, you know, you're never going to come through. And I imagine what they would look like. And this grandmother voice, almost this, it felt like this ancient tree came through, and she said, the children are always yours. It's just which body will the souls inhabit. It's just, you're just mourning the bodies that they're not going to come through.
And so when you learn that, like, I guess that must have given you a lot of relief, and like you didn't like feel like it was sort of over anymore. It just felt like, you know, the birth didn't happen right now, but it's not like it's over. It's not like it's, you know, done forever.
Well, let me let this person go on a spiritual level, right? There's so many layers to grieving somebody, but when you can actually sit with the pain and it starts, and you start to feel it at that spiritual level, where these ideas of these timelines that you were supposed to be on, like, start to disintegrate and you're okay with it, then you start to truly move on. And mourning the children that we were not going to have, and realizing that I was just mourning their vessels, that I didn't have to mourn them as a total loss, that made me actually feel powerful. Because I'm like, oh, I'm actually carrying you in me, and you're going to exist in a better way, because I'm going to make better choices going forward that are more in alignment with me. If you would have come through in these vessels in this life, there are so many things that were dysfunctional about that relationship that they would have had to move through or adopt or take on or whatever it was. But now, and again, no parent is perfect. I'm not going to be a perfect parent. My relationship isn't going to be perfect. All these things, these caveats, I hope you can, you know, help me fill in the blanks a little bit with that. I'm not saying that I've now all of a sudden made all of these perfect decisions and everything's going to be great forever. But what I am saying is that those souls are carried with me. And if I am lucky enough in this life to become a mother one day, they will have a better chance of beginning life starting on their own terms and not having to work through my unprocessed shit before they get to claim their life as their own.
Yeah, I mean, I've only learned through the past like few years, like there is this thing called like generational trauma, and like, you know, I don't, you know, I'm not an expert on it by any means, but you know, a lot of people do feel that, you know, your unhealed trauma is passed on to your children, and you know, the fact that, you know, you've gone through this gigantic healing process seems like, you know, and again, I'm sure there's still some things that you want to figure out and heal and all that kind of stuff, but like, you know, the things that you really didn't want to pass on seem to have been, you know, largely resolved. And so, you know, I think that's, you know, a good thing, not just for you, but also obviously for, you know, your future kids, because you do want to, you know, have children, you know, when you are in a good place. Like I said, not economically, it's not a good time. And there's certainly lots of, you know, crazy shit that's going on in the world. And, you know, we don't know, you know, a lot of things about even Canada, because there's so much crazy shit going on in Canada. But, you know, at least, you know, there's some things that are under your control that you do seem to have, you know, under control, or at least much better controlled now, which is, you know, amazing.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we don't have time to go into it right away, but I'll just say one thing is like, I actually feel like the first 33 years of my life was spent living out my parents' unprocessed grief towards each other. And when this relationship ended, it actually felt like I broke that kind of that intergenerational trauma. Like I actually felt like
amazing.
I healed it. And my life started to become my own. And I was no longer looking out at the world through a lens of my mother's and my father's trauma and unhealed wounding. It was like this veil was lifted. We hear this language all the time, and then you experience it in your body and you're like, oh my God, there really is something here to intergenerational trauma and epigenetics. And I felt a fundamental shift in my being, as if, and I know this sounds crazy and that's okay, but I felt like my DNA changed.
Yeah. Well, you know what? We always hear this phrase that, like, you know, hurt people, but, you know, maybe not all the time. Maybe some hurt people don't hurt other people. And, it takes a very, very strong person to be able to, stop that line of hurt. But, it seems like, you've done what you've had to do and experienced what you've had to experience to be able to do it. So, I sincerely congratulate you on that. And I think that's awesome.
Thank you.
And I know we only have about 10 minutes left. And
is this the direction you thought the podcast was going to go? We're just, like I said, I'm just talking to you like I would talk to you if we weren't recording, but I'm curious to hear if this is.
I'm glad it's gone this way. I did, want to chat with you a little bit about some of your other work, and to some degree, but like I don't really have any like objectives, coming into it. When I, prepare for a podcast with someone like you, I just know that like I don't need to, prepare, and that doesn't mean that I don't take it seriously as say some other, guests or anything like that. It just means that I think we'll just have a better conversation, and people will, appreciate listening to this better if we just, keep it unscripted, so to speak. But at the same time too, I bet a lot of people do want to know about your BDSM work, which is what I'm going to ask you about next, because it's literally something I know like nothing about. And I know that you have done a lot of work and a lot of research into this. And, you do think, or know, maybe I should say that like it can be very therapeutic for some people. I don't know if you think that maybe people get into it too much and it can be, damaging at times. But, for people who don't know, who are like a newbie to this, like me, what is, BDSM, and how can it help people, and how is it therapeutic?
So I'll jump. I'm going to jump from like super novice language into more expert language in a really short amount of time here. But I think, again, like if anybody's listening and they're interested in this, you can reach out to me and I can provide some recommendations. And like I said, I'm writing a book on this topic. So BDSM, let's start with the acronym. It stands for bondage and discipline, dominance and submission, sadism and masochism. And sadism and masochism essentially mean the sadist is someone who enjoys inflicting pain, and I'm going to go a little further into that too. And a masochist is someone who enjoys receiving pain. We hear the word pain and we generally think something unwelcomed. But I like to substitute the word pain for intense sensation. So it's someone with the capacity or the desire to feel a more intense sensation as a somatic experience. When we go get a deep tissue massage, we don't go, I'd like to go lie on a table and have someone inflict pain on me. But we know that through that intensity, it's going to help us get into our body. We're going to feel better. For someone who enjoys BDSM, who is a sadist or a masochist or just enjoys those practices, they're generally people with a higher tolerance for risk, and people who require or desire or are drawn to higher intense, the deeper intense sensations in order to feel present, in order to get into their bodies and in order to process. And for some people, it's just fun. It's just sexy. It's something new that they want to try. There's all these other reasons outside of, let's call it a therapeutic context. I'm specifically interested in BDSM in a therapeutic context. That's my area of research and my body of work. But again, there are many other reasons why people do it. And it's not just for deep emotional processing. So that's the very beginning. That's the high level overview. As I've explored this world over the last, like I said, decade, why do I see it, or why do I think it can actually be therapeutic? So let me give you an analogy for somebody who is getting flogged. Now, a flogger is not like a whip. A flogger has multiple falls, as you'd call them. So imagine like a dowel with multiple strands of leather on it, and you're using that to rhythmically hit somebody. Okay, so that's let's just call that's a flogger. So that's an implement. You'd say that's a BDSM implement for impact play. So let's say that someone is getting flogged and it's rhythmic, and there's different ways that you can use sound and touch and rhythm and intensity to help someone kind of get out of their head and get into their body. And I think we can all agree that getting out of our head and getting into our body is a good thing. If you feel safe, if you are properly guided, sometimes it's not safe. It doesn't feel safe to be in your body. That's why it's good to be, let's say, call it trauma informed or trauma sensitive when you're using BDSM for therapeutic practices, because you do want to notice if someone disassociates. You want to also help create an environment in which they're safe to go down into their body and get out of their mind. So again, it's a lot, but just bear with me here. So when it's raining outside, heavily raining, like let's say it's a thunderstorm and you're laying in bed and there's lightning and there's hail and the thunder is rolling through, you don't feel scared to be laying in your bed. A matter of fact, how intense it is outside of your house and how it's shaking on your house, but you trust the foundations of your house, you actually feel cozier and safer in your bed. Let's imagine that your body is the home, and that flogger raining down on you with that intense sensation is like a storm that's hitting up against your body. All of a sudden, you have this feeling of being inside of your body and being safe inside of your body. Kind of the same way that you feel safe in your bed when you trust the foundation of your house when there's a storm outside. Even that split second where somebody who has experienced trauma, who has, like, let's call it sexual trauma or any type of violence, or their body was used against them, or they have been in a situation where they felt like a loss of agency with their own body and they shot up to their mind because it was just a safer place to be. Even that split second where they can come down into their body and feel themselves kind of curled up in their body, listening to the storm outside and feeling that against the walls of their home, but feel safe, that is transformative for somebody, even if it only lasts a second.
That's a very good explanation. I didn't really expect for you to explain it like that at all. And so what would people like come to you say for, like, whether they be struggling with like general things, just like anxiety, depression, like insomnia, like it's just, general things that people would struggle with, and then you put them through this process, and then they, come back and say, you know what, I'm less anxious, I'm less socially anxious, less depressed, like what, I guess maybe you just run through like a typical client or two.
Yeah. So a lot of the time, this is what's really interesting, and some might say dangerous, but again, when you're engaging in BDSM, you're willingly engaging in risky behavior. So fundamentally, you're opting into a contract to engage in a certain type of behavior that could be considered dangerous. And so number one, both parties, let's say a dom and a sub who link up, they're choosing that. It's a choice. So a lot of the time, it's not even obvious to the person who's engaging or drawn to BDSM, maybe why they are or what they're looking for. And it's an exploration. So, and I'll get to your question, because there are some people who have a specific thing, but I just want to make it clear that sometimes you just don't know what's in there. Like sometimes you don't know.
Psychedelics almost.
Yeah, exactly. That's such a good comparison. It's like a psychedelic trip where you're choosing to take this medicine. This is the way that you want to go into your inner world, right? And that's what a dom and a sub essentially allow each other to do. The dom focuses in on the sub and creates a space for them to safely go inward. And so it's like attention out by the dom, attention in by the submissive. And it's this pairing up that allows for that to happen. So the submissive is going to go inward, and they might not always know what it is that they're going to find. The same way a psychedelic trip, you don't always know what's there, but you know there's something that's impacting your ability to live life in a way that feels more aligned with you. There's a misalignment, and it comes out in ways that are often subconscious, and you're drawn to this inner exploration. You might not know what it is that you're going to find, but trust in your guide. In many ways, this is the Dom, but also your own sense of self-responsibility and self-agency to make that choice to go there, right? No one's forcing you to take the psychedelic. No one's forcing you to get tied up and get flogged or blindfolded or ball gagged or whatever. And so you're like, oh my God. But
a little bit, yeah.
A little bit, yeah. But it's a choice. And so that alone is beautiful for someone who might have experienced like a lack of agency. And in many ways, most of us have. And I'm not, just statistically, generally more women have experienced a lack of agency in their bodies. And so a lot of women are drawn to exploring submission safely within the context of BDSM. In many ways, I like to call it like the last safe refuge for submission that doesn't piss off feminists. And there's a beautiful exploration that happens for the woman who wants to submit and go inward into her body to find something that she might not even necessarily know exactly what it is, but that feeling of being restrained or of impact is going to bring something up for her, right? Rarely do we get to experience this kind of eroticization of violence, I'm putting that in quotations, other than in the context of BDSM. So if you're all of a sudden now able to reenact or recreate a sensation of, let's say, helplessness, such as bondage, but you're doing it in a safe context, think about the memories that might bring up that you didn't even realize were still in your body affecting you, that you're now going to be able to safely work through.
That makes total sense.
Right.
And I imagine that, in your research and doing this, you found a lot of different, papers, and obviously, you've experienced it yourself, that all that stuff is going in your book.
Yeah. Well, I've interviewed some of the top experts in the world, psychologists and scientists who are doing research and have done research since the 70s, 80s. Again, it's not like a super popular area of study. Generally,
that's good,
it's lack of funding. Yeah.
You can be one of the first, experts in it,
Well, that's exactly it.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I'm really excited to, again, what an interesting perspective and vantage point. And I kind of think of like Michael Pollan's work with, how to change your mind and the exploration of psychedelics. He kind of did the same thing. Like Michael Pollan is a journalist, and he went and he tried all these psychedelics and experienced it for himself, and then was able to interview the experts and weave in his personal experience as a novice into like with these expert interviews. I'm kind of doing the same thing over here with this book and exploration of BDSM as a potential form of therapy, not because I necessarily think that it needs to be a form of therapy in the current therapeutic model that we have, in the same way that psychedelics is actually causing us to look at all of the ways that our therapeutic models are not working, that the institution of therapy is actually not conducive to these deeply healing modalities. I don't think that BDSM is going to fit into the current therapeutic institution. But what I think it's going to do is it has the opportunity to create its own category, or for people who maybe don't approach it because they're afraid of it or intimidated by it. And I mean, let's not forget that, BDSM was still listed as a pathology, or sadism and masochism was still listed as a pathology in the DSM-5. So you actually have psychologists who have still been trained on an old model to essentially look at people who enjoy BDSM as sick, right, as unwell. So there's a shift that has to actually take place in how we look at what can be considered therapy and why. And we need a bit of an expansive definition of that. And I think we have dance therapy and art therapy. So we have these things that are coming in, but BDSM as therapy, I don't think it's actually going to, let's say, fit in the current model, but I think it's going to become quite undeniable to people how powerful these practices actually are, in the same way that we've kind of come culturally to that realization through the use of psychedelics.
Yeah, I mean, there's been all these kind of like underground, psychedelic circles, and now, there's a bunch of different studies being done at various different universities. And Rick Doblin was on Rogan recently. That was actually a really great interview, and it's becoming much, much more mainstream now. So I can imagine, the same thing happens. Could happen with BDSM, and just like we were on a podcast like 5 years ago, and this thought just like kind of came to me. About like, I was saying how like 5 years ago in this podcast, like some people who, want to do psychedelics, like they're okay with, doing it in like an underground place where like, the person's like a little bit odd, maybe they don't have like, any teeth. They don't really look like they're someone who's like well put together kind of thing. Some people would prefer to go to, a university sort of setting and just like, their doctor looks like their doctor that they see for family medicine or for, gastroenterology or their orthopedic surgeons. They just look like, a normal doctor, so to speak. And that's what, even though I think you're obviously an exceptionally unique person, that's where I think though that it may, be helpful for you. Like you just seem like, I hate to say the word normal because it's like you're not normal. You're very, very unique and special, but like, you don't look like someone that like, people wouldn't trust, or, you don't have like, face tattoos and, earrings and weird spots or anything like that. Like you just, look like a nice girl, so to speak, to some degree, right? And so I think that, could bode very well for you, like going forward and kind of making it more mainstream. Whereas if you, did have like, a bit of an odd look or temperament to you, which you don't, it may not, it would be more difficult, I think, to make it, mainstream. So
there's a Tom for everyone, and I think, and again, that's why I'm kind of moving away from that, but without totally saying it's like I said, I'm in this interesting transition, right? Where I'm starting to kind of look at what are the titles that I actually could use to best reflect who's drawn to me. Like rather than saying I'm this, I'm actually going, well, what if I erase all these titles and I just purely look at who's coming to me for help? And in many ways, it's the I almost want to say like the housewife types. They're new, they're scared, they want something, they don't really know how to put it into words. Like they haven't had an orgasm ever. They love their husband, but they're like, but there's got to be more. They're like the 50 Shades of Grey crowd. Like 50 Shades of Grey, it blew my mind, and I felt arousal in my body for the first time, and I don't know what to do with it now. Like those women love me, they trust me, and so if I'm branding myself as like this dominatrix, that they might see that word and go and have these ideas and go, oh God, I can't do that. It's way outside my comfort zone. But I run an organization, like I said, the Garden of Earthly Delights, where I do bring a lot of new women in, and my teachings are gentle. Like I can take all of my knowledge, but I can go back to that beginner mindset, but I can teach as a master.
Yeah. And you can relate to their feminine energy as well.
Yes.
Like you're not trying to like dominate them. You're just trying to like teach and make them feel understood. And, once they feel like they can feel comfortable with you, which again, I just think that you have, a little bit of a gift, or you're just like kind of naturally born with that to some degree, where people feel very comfortable with you, like right away. Like, we felt very comfortable with each other right away. I think that will, bode well for you very like going forward with like that type of like clientele, because it will be uncomfortable for a lot of people to reach out to you,
And funny enough, I think I'd almost like to call it rediscovering monogamy is actually going to help me in my practices as I work with these couples, or even I work with these women, many of whom want traditional relationship structures. I just worked with a woman this past weekend. We did like a 48-hour intensive together in many ways. And she, you know, she went into it, her time with me, almost with a frenetic energy, like kind of like the embodiment of cocaine, and just wasn't grounded and wasn't connected to her body, was super in her head and didn't feel strong in her feminine power. So it was like kind of bro-y with me. And wanted a deeper connection with her partner. She's married, but was like, I don't know how to get it. I don't know how to enjoy sex with this person. And was so ashamed of desire and what it meant to want sex and pleasure. And by the end of her time with me, which included coming to the garden and being surrounded by other women who were also exploring these things. And so she didn't feel alone, which is a huge relief to begin with, when you just realize that other women are going through this and you can be like, oh my God, we can help each other. And then I insert a few workshops and a few different teachings, and now they have things to work with. And she came out of that weekend with me. I kid you not, her voice had changed. She was speaking from a more grounded place. There was so much space cleared in her. She was excited to get home to her partner, to have
more
sex.
confidence, it sounds like.
More confidence. And and that's the thing, is she said, like, I always thought women were weak, right? I shut myself off to my feminine power because I thought it was inherently weak. And I realized that it is actually so powerful, and the way that I can move through the world as a woman who feels confident and in her body. And so I'm not out there teaching women how to whip men, or I'm not there saying like men are bad and they need to submit to you for you to feel dominant and powerful. That's actually in many ways the opposite of what I'm teaching. It's like, let me show you what this feminine power can look like, what embodiment can look like. And then you take that into your life and watch how your life changes. And that's the beautiful part of this teaching.
Well, it sounds like she had a wonderful experience, and I hope, I know many more people who, do reach out to you will have that experience.
Mm-hmm.
I know I've gone past your time there now. You probably got to go. I do too. But, before we close things off here, just let people know where they can reach out to you, where they can become a client. I don't know if you have, a date on when your book may be coming out, maybe not yet, but just anything that, people can get in touch with you about.
Yeah. The easiest portal right now would be my Instagram. So my Instagram is at Nicolle L. So I'm sure you'll put it in the show notes, but it's Nicolle. So 2 L's in Nicolle, the word double, and then another L. And through that, you'll find my work with men who take baths. You'll find a link to my Substack through my Linktree. And I put out a lot of free content around BDSM for healing through my Substack. And then if you are interested in working with me, you can reach out to me through my DMs, and we can I'll send you an intake form. Right now, my focus, it's so working with women for sure. But again, like with women, I specifically like to get them into the garden. So I like to kind of get them into this community so they can, women work best, I found, when there's also community support. And so I really do like to do that. And then working with couples, and then also working with men. So generally what I'm finding is, and again, if you're a man who identifies more with submission and that's something you want to explore, reach out for sure. I won't take you one-on-one as a client of mine, per se, as in like, I won't dom you, but I can help you become more confident with your submission. And I can also put you in touch with some really amazing doms out of Toronto and New York that I know. But the work with men who want to embody dominance and bring more dominance into their relationship, I am also working with. And the reason I'm finding there's a need is because women are asking their men to be more dominant. And those men who, let's say, identify as good men, don't want to hurt their partners and ask themselves, well, how can I do these things to her and still love her and still feel like a good guy? and I will help you work through that.
That's awesome. And I know that was a awesome closing statement there, but just one quick comment. I remember you posted something, it might've been a month or two ago now, where you're kind of like making fun of someone who said that like, oh, you're kind of sick if like you want to be slapped or something like that. And it's like, you're not. Like, I can tell you, like, a lot of girls definitely enjoy that and fantasize about it, and you don't have to make it violent to any degree, and afterwards you won't feel weird or anything like that, and you'll just go back to having, hopefully you're in a great relationship. But anyways, yeah, everyone get in touch with Nicolle. She definitely knows what she's doing. She has a lot of experience. She's awesome. I know her personally. Trust me, you're going to have a good time. And follow her on Instagram too. Nicolle, it was awesome chatting with you today. We're definitely never, ever going 2 years without doing this again. So yeah, look out for another episode with Nicolle and I soon. But yeah, this one will be up next week. So thank you everyone for listening. And as always, I'll be back with another episode soon.